you invest in loyalty. You can target families which you know that has a young boy, as a football player, perhaps 9 or 10 years old. You carry out gifts. You carry out these new football shoes. You take them to practice because the family don't own a car. They pay their fees for the academy, whatever. So when it's time for this player to actually become a full-grown star at the age of 18 or 19, their loyalty is toward their agent and not to the club.
Welcome to The Laundry, the podcast connecting AML, compliance and financial crime to the real world. I'm your host Fredrik, Head of Strategy and Business Development at Strise, and in this episode, we're revealing the financial crime risks of football. The beautiful game, a sport adored by billions across the world. Fans will cheer from the stands on match days, buy the shirts, campaign for new signings, and pay for subscription packages to watch all big games. Meanwhile, wealthy owners pour fortunes into their chosen teams, hoping to elevate their clubs to the top of the football pyramid and turning them into a valuable global brand in return. But alongside all this money streaming in from passionate supporters, wealthy owners, TV deals, and big-name sponsors, there are dark avenues of finance which have made their way into these beloved institutions.
The sports industry has been fertile ground for money laundering, tax evasion, and corruption for a long time.
What about China? Are we going to see more partnerships in that part of the world?
China has, from the top down, decided that football is extremely important, and our whole ethos in China is helping the national initiative around football.
The annual cost of global sport corruption amounts to a staggering 90 billion euros per year, with Europe's cash-rich football sector attracting a particular interest from organized criminals.
We can influence the appointment of match officials before bribing a ref to fix the result our way. And then we make a killing on the Asian betting markets.
According to Forbes, Jonathan Barnett, George Mendes and Mino Raiola all rank among the top 5 most lucrative sports agents in the world. After finding out Raiola's fee for the Pogba transfer, former Crystal Palace chairman Simon Jordan has referred to agents as evil, divisive scum.
The end result of all of this is we get to a position where it's 5 or 6 big conglomerates basically running football, which clearly we don't want, but UEFA have got themselves in a complete bind with it.
There is no corruption in football. There is corruption with individuals. The institution FIFA is not corrupt.
One classic method of laundering cash through football has been for criminals to take over financially unstable clubs and then pump it with illegal funds.
I know that I'm a honest man.
Your conscience is clean.
So, yeah, I'm clean.
Money makes the world go round.
A report from the United Nations estimated that around $140 billion is laundered through football every single year. In 2019, football was added to the European Union's watch list of money laundering risks following an investigation which implicated almost 60 agents, administrators, referees, and coaches. So, how did the beautiful game become the playing field of financial foul play? In today's episode, we will discuss how is the football industry vulnerable to financial crime and money laundering? What impact will upcoming regulations have on the game that we all love? And why do we need to get this right for the fans and for players alike? To dive into this topic, I'm here in Stockholm with Fredrik Söderberg, CEO and Club Director of AIK Fotboll. Welcome to The Laundry, Fredrik.
Thank you so much.
Can you tell our listeners a bit about you, your background, and for our international listeners, a bit about AIK, Allmänna Idrottsklubben Football Club?
I'll start with the club then, because it's far more interesting than myself. The club was founded in 1891. We're a multi-sports club to start with 14 different sports, football being the biggest by far. We've been Swedish champions 12 times. We have the highest tendency in Scandinavia, and we are among the absolute top when it comes to knowledge and brand and engagement in Scandinavian football, I would say. So it's definitely mentioned as a top club in this region, which of course is a different region when it comes to financial situations than many other, but it's one of the largest club in Scandinavia by far in any way you measure. And myself, I've been working at the club for 5 years, being the CEO on a permanent basis since this summer. I've been deputy CEO since 2020. I come from the event and ticketing business to start with. I've been working at our home venue since 2012, before joining AIK in 2018. So I have a background for sports events mainly.
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction. Let's start by looking at how football and financial crime can potentially be something which fits together. So, as your role as the CEO, the club director, what are the day-to-day duties that you manage, and how often are you thinking about issues like financial crime and compliance?
They come to mind in so many different aspects, because the main revenue streams for football are basically player transfers and sponsorships and TV rights, etc., which is, in many way aspects that we come across compliance issues for many times. So it's been a journey for me personally to learn so much about the risks that we're facing from every single time. Not mention the betting industry, of course, that's really put its claws in football. At the darkest side of that, it comes to match fixing problems, which we see an increase in Swedish football. So it's becoming I wouldn't say daily part of my job, but fairly often I'm approached by issues that comes from compliance or due diligence issues.
Would you say it's becoming more common now? You mentioned it's on the rise in many ways in the Swedish football era, but
yeah, I think so for many reasons. First of all, the Swedish football has had a huge increase in commercial value for the past decades. And also another aspect of it when it comes to player transfer is that we had regulations for the past 9 years that, it's solidly described as pure anarchy. We used to be very relegated, but then for whatever reason, just to explain, there are regulations on a European or international level, and then every national federation can make their own rules and regulations in terms of representing football players and agencies, etc. The Swedish regulation has really been one of the worst in Europe, with no regulation at all. Pretty much anyone could be an agent. If you align that with the fact that commercial value raises enormously, the enormous increase in interest and passion and engagement for the Swedish football, the academies for Swedish clubs has been raising in quality for the past decades, and also that we have an international regulation when it comes to player agents that they can represent. There are three parts of a player transfer. It's the selling club, the buying club, and the player. And due to international regulation, an agent can represent all three parts, which that you can monitor all revenue streams in a business deal. And when you come from a Swedish perspective, pretty much anyone can be an agent as long as you are not in a criminal record. That's pretty much it. You can be in the criminal record, but not for certain amount of crime, I think, something like that. And when you have that kind of very loose regulation on a national level, it's an open field.
Absolutely, and we're going to touch upon sort of how players and the valuation of players could in many ways look like the classical trade-based money laundering, where they have extremely subjective value, right? And then, as you mentioned, with agents representing both the buying and the selling part, the valuation then becomes something they have complete ownership of, to fuel funds from one side to another and so forth. But and taking one step back, what makes football clubs attractive opportunities for money laundering and financial crime, do you think?
Because it's a quick fix for huge deals that are non-lasting. When you make a transfer, after that transfer is done, there's pretty much, everything is already taken care of. So that deal in itself is a one-term deal. That's not, it's not like a sponsorship deal that goes on for, which has an annual revenue streams, etc., on a long-term sheet or something. The transfer is done, it's brought out once, and it's a huge asset of money. And it's, as we say, if you monitor itself with vague regulations, it's pretty easy target. And also the lack of transparency for second or third part ownership in the deal. You have extremely limited or none view about how that revenue stream goes further on after from the agent that set up the deal. So it's an easy target in so many aspects for a very quick deal if you're in the money business, I would say.
And speaking generally, what are some ways or examples in which you've seen that, or heard of at least, that dark money is making its way into the football clubs?
Well, if we come back to play transfers, which has several examples of, I would start with match fixing, because that's also an increasing problem with international betting sites, from all around the world, can open up betting industries for specific games on very, very low level in different countries. Sweden definitely not an exception. And these players are so far away from professional players that you can come. They have no income basically on playing football, which makes them try to be part of match fixing. So that is a huge problem for the Swedish Football Federation as we speak to monitor. But even on a professional level, in 2017, AIK was approached. Our goalkeeper was approached from a person who wanted to offer him a deal for match fixing, which he became a whistleblower for that, and the game was cancelled, and there was a police investigation, and the person who was carrying out this proposition was jailed. But it's an interesting case that money laundering goes up as high as the highest division of the Swedish Football League. So that is examples of money laundering taking care on a daily basis, I would say, in football. Not only Sweden, of course, but on a daily basis. When it comes to play transfer, as we said, the monitoring of the all revenue streams comes from one part alone, and when you can see that part has accounts set up in Malta or the Caymans or whatever, so that's a huge red flag, isn't it?
I think one of the interesting aspects, and we talked about this briefly prior to the recording as well, is these players, especially when the players get big, they have big brand names, which opens up a lot of opportunities in terms of endorsement, agreements, sponsorships, you name it, so many channels of which money laundering could take place on a cross-border level as well, because they will have fans potentially from over the world and brands from all over the world approaching them. And in terms of investments made from gangs and criminals to basically invest in future brands, that it could be a startup company, but it could also well be a young person, potential football player in the future.
Yeah.
Talk to me a bit about sort of what goes into I don't know if investment is the right word, but...
No, but I think it is, because that's what you do. I mean, you invest in loyalty. That's pretty much what you do, that you come to family, especially when we look at areas in for instance, Stockholm suburbs, that is definitely, socially diverse, financially and on a social basis. You can target families, which that has a young boy, as a football player, and that is perhaps 9 or 10 years old. You target a family, you carry out gifts, you carry out these new football shoes, you take them to practice because the family don't own a car, they live long away from the training ground, they pay their fees for the academy, whatever. What they do is that, as you say, they invest in their loyalty. So when it's time for this player to actually become a full-grown star at the age of 18 or 19, their loyalty is toward their agent or representative, and not to the club that they're playing in. That is the common way to start working on investing in loyalty. But also I would say that if you look at the money streams that you make on a football deal, the value of a player is so subjective. There's no fixed price for a right-wing defender. It's depending on how much the buying club really wants it. And it's so easy to get away with that, to overpay for a player's value when you monitor all revenue streams.
I think that's such an interesting example, and especially potentially connected to the actual corruption and fixing of games as well.
Yeah.
I would imagine it wouldn't take Einstein to sort of come up with an elaborate scheme that would have a half-season sort of fixing in A-leagues in South America, as an example, where somebody would completely outscore the league average and be picked up by one of the talent scouts for a European club willing to pay 10x what the person is actually worth.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk about sponsorships.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways in which sponsoring a team or a football club could be used for financial crime purposes, the way that you see it?
I think that the red flags in sponsorship is first of all, because that happened to me a couple of times, when you receive an email preferably through a broker from a company that wants to establish on the Swedish market, and they're paying a huge amount of money in order to associate with our brand. I start to think, why are we so special? I mean, this is a company that comes right out of the blue through a broker, willing to invest. And, they always make it sound like AIK is so interesting for them to approach me. Like, you're paying more than any of our other sponsors for basic, and you haven't even started to discuss what the revenue rights are. I mean, what can we offer for you to associate with our club? There's no discussion at all. Just want to dump a lot of money on us, and that happens from time to time. And it's basically it's from either specific geographical markets, or it's from different business angles, such as exchange companies, currency exchange companies, or oil investment, stuff like that. Those kind of companies are very often interesting. I wouldn't say those kind of companies are often interesting. When there comes an interest to us, basically those businesses are definitely two businesses that are represented.
So you mentioned that you've personally gotten a couple of emails.
Yeah, sure.
How do you talk to other club directors about these issues? Is there some sort of forum where these risks are basically accumulated and made aware of?
That's one interesting thing about football. I don't know this specifically for the Swedish league, or if it goes abroad as well, but one of the things that protects us is that we have a very good relationship between the clubs. I can call the CEOs of our fierce rivals on pitch to discuss such a topic. Like, okay, I've been approached by this company. Have you heard anything about it? Says, yeah, I received the same email. Or, and then we know this is not of interest. I don't think that. I think this is quite a new phenomenon, because I don't think that's really what it was in the first place. Because, we work in football. We come from football. We love, as you said, we love the sports. We love the game in itself. Most people that work in football are not so familiar with these risks. They don't have a background as business people from the beginning, especially on a tier level that the Swedish league is. In some sort of European hierarchy, I would say that out of 4-level tier, we are on the 3rd level tier. It's like if the Premiership clubs and La Liga clubs are in the top tier, then perhaps the Netherlands and Belgium stuff. So such leagues are on the 2nd tier. Then we are on the 3rd. Scandinavian leagues, I would say, in the 3rd tier. And the people working here, they come from the pitch. So perhaps we're not as open for these kind of risks as you would be if you come from a different background. So that what I would say is that it helps a lot that we open up towards one another.
Do you think there should be some sort of governance put into play, or some sort of institution that would have an overview, make sure like all foul agents are marked, that sponsorships or approaches with sponsorships from certain businesses are marked, so that there would be some knowledge base to tap into, basically, to get an overview? Because as you mentioned, hypothetically, say there's a new person coming in who doesn't have the network that you have, and is approached and maybe doesn't even think too much about compliance at the time, and so forth, and all of a sudden 6 months down the line, 18 months down the line, they find themselves in really hot water with somebody they never should have signed a business agreement with.
I think it's crucial that we find such a solution, and I must say things have definitely happened the past year, because both the Swedish Football Federation as well as the Swedish League Association has taken a big responsibility for educating the clubs. They hired integrity officers that's working with this on a daily basis. We as a club as well has hired integrity officers working with us in order to maintain substantial deals, and working a lot with education for all stakeholders. Could be parents and families as well as internal staff. So there's a lot of things going on. The networking and the engagement between the clubs, I think it's crucial for us in order to get the problem fixed, because you need to show yourself vulnerable. You need to show yourself that we don't know everything about this, and that was lacking in football, because once again, it's a very short-term game. Everybody's looking to winning the next game or the league title, and it's a huge difference if we qualify for European tournaments or if we're not. It's a huge amount of difference in our revenue streams whether we do it. So giving away or open up to a competitor like that is not something that used to be commonly recognized in the football industry. So I'm really glad that we're breaking these bars between us, and we can actually say, like, okay, we don't really know all about this. Can you please help us? What is your experience? And when we started talking to each other, it seems like even the richest clubs, as well as very small clubs in the league, they have the same problem. So we can help each other.
Can you keep a secret? This is Strictly Confidential, the podcast connecting AML, compliance, and financial crime to the real world is hosting a live on-stage recording in Sweden. We're recording the Laundry live on May 14th at Venue 81 in Stockholm, bringing you killer keynotes, expert guests, scorching hot takes, and networking, drinks, and pizza too. Follow the links in the show notes to get your free ticket to this event or to sign up to our live stream. And as always, stay vigilant out there.
Talking about evolution and talking about change, there's an upcoming law change which may impact this. So just for context and for the listeners as well, a bill currently being passed through the European Parliament world would mean that from 2029, most professional clubs and every agent within the EU will be required to verify their customers' identities, monitor all transactions, and that includes player transfers as well. They would also have to report suspicious transfers to the relevant financial intelligence units. They would be required to identify and publish beneficial owners who own at least 15% of the club in transparency registers, and design and implement the appropriate transaction monitoring procedures to identify suspicious transactions. So moving more into the sort of traditional banking, financing, moving money around on their own infrastructure world. But what are your thoughts on this type of legislation?
If it can become a reality, I would say total game changer, because they point out all the aspects that are the risks in a player transfer. It's a lack of transparency that is the main risk from the legislation as it is right now. So if we can come along with this new bill, it will be a complete game changer for us. Along with that, we have the international legislation, as I said, is something that's been discussing all through 2023 when it comes to player agents, that is. So FIFA was put up with a new legislation for player agents during 2023. It was unfortunately it was put on hold. That would have taken care of the agent controlling 3 parts of the deal. You can only control 2 parts to the most. You can never be in control of the player and the selling club, but the player and the buying club if the selling club agrees to it. So unfortunately, this legislation was called the FFAR, was put on hold. If we get the FFAR active, as long as this bill, I think it would be a massive change in the football industry when it comes to compliance.
Super interesting. How prepared do you think most football clubs are for this sort of new increased type of scrutiny and legislations?
I would say it depends on what kind of club you have or what kind of ownership model that you have, because there's a different type of ownership model in international football these days. To be fair, I would say there's a few clubs that perhaps it's not as positive as I am for these for these news, because perhaps it doesn't really fit their purposes. What do I know? But if you have the sustainable ownership model for the club, I would say that you have fairly enough of time now to prepare for these changes. My concern is not so much that we are not prepared to implicate the changes. It's more that the changes will not be as significant as they are described. I think that, you will find loopholes, because that's the first thing we need to do, is to identify the loopholes in order to fix it. Because if you really, really want to make a lot of money, and you've been used to making a lot of money in a certain business model, you're not going to give up.
Absolutely. We talked about sort of Swedish football today, but it's very much an international sport.
Oh, yeah.
And there's
Sweden is a very small part of the football world, I would say.
And Swedish teams also compete on an international basis in European cups and so forth. And that means that the playing field isn't necessarily even, because the regulations are different to what type of standards and what type of legislations and what sort of time scale that you'll have to implement these changes, and how transparent that you are, and integrity that we talked about and so forth. How is sort of this increased scrutiny going to affect this? Because this might actually lead to harder criteria to compete on for the ones who obliges and actually will follow the rules. Meanwhile, the other ones who may not get the penalty that they should, at least at the very beginning, might have a competitive advantage when it comes to winning the football game or making the revenue or bottom line. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that you need to start from the top. You need a federation, an international football federation, a European football federation with very high integrity. And the legislations that is set from their side that is the only way that we can control the money drivers in modern football. Because football is based on a trickle-down effect. What's going on the top, very, very top clubs these days, it takes a few years, but that money will trickle down to Sweden after a while. So everybody's in one way or another affected by the money industry within international football. And as long as we have, and I'm going to say, a very passive federation at the top, which I think we do, I think it's open for pretty much any club or any not so serious part to infect football from a very dark perspective. So we need to start at the top and have an international federation and a European federation, which is with very high integrity. So they got a job to do internally now.
Interesting. And crucially, the EU legislation would not apply to England's Premier League.
No.
Which many people think is sort of the greatest league in the world, or at least for TV rights and so forth. I guess it's the Premier League and La Liga, and that's about it. Like that's the biggest deals these days commercially. Do you think money laundering and financial crime operations will then focus themselves outside of the EU?
Look at it right now. I mean, most of the money comes from the Arabian countries as well, into Premier League to start with, and then, as I said, trickles down through Europe. So the beauty of it is that the International Football Federation and the European Federation can have an internal legislation that is based on the EU legislation, which would apply to the Premier League as well, if they want to. And it will be interesting to see if they want to go down that road, because if the Premiership lives with a different kind of legislation than the rest of us, but competes on the same level, the system is broken right away.
Absolutely. Do you think this will affect European football for the fans in some ways?
I think it's already had, and it will continue. What is discussed right now through football, that's why I mentioned a little bit about ownership models, because you have one ownership model is for instance, multi-club ownership, that a company group can own several clubs within the European league systems, which I think it's very troublesome, because if it was, as long as we have international competitions that are also the money drivers here, I mean that's where you make most of the money. If these two clubs face one another, the integrity is definitely hurt, and so that kind of ownership model I have very trouble with. The ownership model that we have in Sweden is definitely up for discussion as well. It's the 51% model, which I mean, as for instance, AIK as a club, we're listed on the stock market, but we, in order to be active within the Swedish league system, we need to have a majority owner, which is a membership-owned association, which owns at least 51% of the club, of the votes in the club. And that goes all along the Swedish league. I think Germany has the same, and a couple of other countries have the same ownership models. If you have a 51% rule ownership model for different markets, and you have a multi-club ownership model for other markets, it's two different worlds to compete in.
Because one of them would attract more international capital on the remaining 50. Yeah.
Of course, and I would say that 51% rule ownership model is a very long-term model, because there's hardly any club that is under the 51% rule ownership model that's going in bankruptcy. And if they do, they just start over, because the membership association can just restart a club. But when it comes to clubs that has a multi-club ownership model, it's a very short-term investment, or it could be at least. And what we hear about is the successful stories for these kind of ownership models. But there's, out of 10, there's 1 or 2 that is successful, and there's like 8 or 9 clubs that is not in the top leagues, that are, basically just used for money laundering or raising the equity in a really fast phase, and then ditch the club. And out of sustainable perspective, it's very inaccurate. So these are the topics for the Football Federation, the International Football Federation, and the European Football Federation. They need to face these issues much more than they do.
And this will trickle down into compliance that will need to be exercised by the clubs themselves. And but looking through the sort of the checkbox compliance exercises and making sure one is actually compliant with whatever the legislation or regulations at the time may be, holistically for football, why is this important? Why is it important to get this right for the fans? What does it mean for the players? What does it mean for AIK and the future of institutions such as AIK?
First of all, football is for the fans. The industry of football is carried out by fans. It's not carried out by players, because if it would simply be the players, first of all, it would be total different kind of money game. So out of a fan perspective, you invest your heart and soul into a club's, not success, but story, basically. The dedicated fan is all about a lifestyle for this club. You're married to it. And if we come into an AIK perspective, our fans are basically our customers, but it's also our owners. And in one way, it's our product, because we have a fantastic atmosphere at our game, which is a part of why we attract sponsors and why we attract players, for that matter. So for us, it's really critical that we work alongside the fans' values for this club. And I think that goes along the way. It doesn't matter if you're AIK or Manchester United or Barcelona. No club would be anything if no one supports them.
And on that statement, I think that's the perfect wrap-up of today's topic. But we do have a couple of quick-fire questions for the very end. So, Fredrik, are you ready?
Sure.
Is there more dark money in football than football fans think?
Yes.
What's the one thing that the football industry could enact tomorrow to limit its risks to financial crime?
To change regulations of play transfers.
What's the biggest red flag when working with potential sponsors, agents, or partners who are backed by dark money?
If they offer money before they ask for the value or for what you can offer.
And what advice would you give to any football club looking at this upcoming regulation?
To work alongside with other clubs and be vulnerable. I mean, give yourself the credit of being vulnerable and admit that you're a part of a business that has problems. Doesn't need to say that you're working the wrong way, but you're part of it. So you need to be open for that and help each other.
And finally, should all the laundry listeners become supporters of AIK Fotboll in your mind?
Anyone should be a supporter of AIK Fotboll.
And on that note, that brings the spin of the laundry to an end. Fredrik, thank you so much for talking to me and taking the time to talk about this important topic. Where can people find and connect with you?
I'm active when it comes to social media, I'm active on LinkedIn and X. I prefer to call Twitter, but I don't think I'm allowed. And otherwise, I'm always at our games. So please come and join us.
Money makes the world go round.
And thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the episode, check out the back catalog and follow The Laundry on your podcast platform of choice. We'd also love for you to share the podcast on your social media channel. It really helps people find us. Got something you would like to share? You can comment on the Strise LinkedIn page, my LinkedIn page, or email laundry@strise.ai. Your host for this episode was me, Fredrik. Our producer was Matthew. Our engineers was Nicholas. The Laundry is proudly produced by Strise, the AML automation cloud. Your data problem and your workflow problem now isn't your problem. Visit strise.ai for more information. See you next time.
Your money make a world go round.